Thank you. My name is Marco Williams. I am the co-director and co-producer of the film. I certainly had a fair amount to do with the story of Southern University in particular. And there are a number of people here who are from Southern. If you would all stand up, who made a difference in helping me to have this. John, thank you for everything. Thank you. Happy to take any questions and even the few criticisms that I'm sure some might have, like, why isn't my institution in the film? I'm sure that that happened in, I screened in North Carolina a couple weeks ago, and there are all sorts of North Carolina Central Eagles in the house, and they were very disappointed that Central didn't get a more prominent role. But at any rate,
maybe to start off, maybe you could tell us a little bit about. Oh, thanks. Maybe to start off, I could do one or two questions, then we could open to the audience. If you want to tell us about sort of how the film first got started, how you first got involved, what the sort of genesis of the project was.
I've known Stanley Nelson for quite a number of years, and I'm going to give you a very brief story. I was on a flight, I think I was actually on a flight from New York City to New Orleans on Delta Airlines, and Delta's magazine had a story about HBCUs, and I thought, I'm going to make a film about HBCUs. And a month or 6 weeks later, I read that Stanley Nelson was making a film about HBCUs. So I called up Stanley and said, if you ever want some help with this, and sure enough, after a couple years, he raised the money, and I got involved in that capacity. So this film is the second of a trilogy for Firelight Media and Stanley Nelson that looks at America Revisited. His first film was The Panthers. The second is this film on HBCUs, and the third will be on the American slave trade. So that's kind of, although they don't make an explicit kind of chronology of America, it's a vision of Stanley to kind of look at these three significant aspects of American history through the African American experience.
And so you have the kind of relationship where you can just call up Stanley Nelson and be like, hey, what's going on?
I used to. I mean, like I said, I've known Stanley for quite a number of years. As fate would have it, Stanley made a film called Freedom Summer. I made a film called Freedom Summer. So yeah, he and I have, it's at once, the documentary film community is at once small or large and small. Certainly the number of African-American directors, although growing, has been small. So yeah, I've known Stanley for quite some time. So I have occasionally called up Stanley and said, I would like to work on something. And I was very fortunate to be part of this project. So the question was, what was the effect of making a film about HBCUs coming from a person who went to a predominantly white institution? Well, I would say this on a very personal level. I regretted that I did not find my way to an HBCU. Although for graduate school, I did look at Howard as a possibility, but it didn't quite have what I was looking for. But in retrospect, I wish that, to go to Harvard University is not a bad place to get an education. So I don't have a regret there. I actually learned filmmaking there. That's what I do. Did I miss something? No doubt about it. I think that and anybody who's gone to an HBCU can sort of tell me straight out that I missed something. I think I missed a sense of community. I think what some of the young people say at the very end of the film, like the young woman from the West Coast, I had gone to a small boarding school. I was one of a small number of black students. So the experience of being at a PWI where you're evaluated not simply for what you're capable of, but looking at your skin color. Do you belong? I'm an affirmative action child? Do I belong? Those sorts of questions at an HBCU. That's not what's being asked. Do you belong because of your race? Maybe do you belong because you're not cutting the grades, et cetera, et cetera. So that's notion of the level playing field, I think, is essential. If I could elaborate in this way, their questions are often asked, why do we need HBCUs at this stage? And I always turn around and say, why do we need PWIs? Because I think that I'm always, certainly having made this film and the experiences I had of speaking to scholars, speaking to those who attended HBCUs, visiting various ones, and really immersing myself in this history, it seems so clear that, and the film, I think, is a testament that absent of HBCUs, America as we know it would not exist. I mean, I think it's persuasive as it's very persuasive, the line that basically says that the only place that a challenge to segregation in this country could have occurred was at an HBCU. It was not coming from Harvard. Was not coming from Yale or Stanford or Berkeley or Northwestern or whatever the great PWIs are. It came from a black college. And so that's why I think that there's no doubt that these institutions are essential to America.
We now have three Gradicals, the Gradical X, the Gradical I, and the Gradical HD. The Gradical X and the Gradical HD are essentially the same unit. The only difference is you can, with the X, only buy the features you want and get in at a lower price. Both of these units are self-powered and they have video distribution. The I, on the other hand, you need power to use this unit. It only has an SD in, and it has two new features, a lit tally light and a proximity sensor to turn the unit off.
And it is small.
So this is our new Gradical line, the X, the I, and the HD.
Yes, ma'am.
Comment that I was an instructor at Southern at that fall of '72 when that tragic event happened. And I just want to say that you need, at this time, what we need now is to go back and look in retrospect as to what happened and how it happened and how we got, and show it to those who do not know about it. It was quite, it's, all of these things are coming into the 50th year anniversary around this time, from the 60s, 62, 65, now it's 50 years. And I can say that when we were in it, but now I can look at it back and reflect on it. And it is a good thing to reflect on where we've come, what we've gone through. I mean, it's just, when I looked at it, I just wanted to cry. That,
I cry when I
yeah,
watch it.
and yeah, because it just looked like it was just yesterday that it happened.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am, all the way in the back, and I'll kind of work my way down. So I started in May, this is 2017. I guess I started 2 years ago. I think it was May 2015. I started on the project. Some part of me might want to say 2014. But I would say that Stanley probably started working on this from Germ probably at least 2 years before that. And the way Stanley Nelson tends to work for his films is that he doesn't start them until he raises almost all of the production. And it's very significant for his work because that allows him to put on into the production team right from the beginning an archival producer. And as you can see from this film, and if you've seen any of the other films, how important the archival footage is. It's not just to illustrate, it tells the story as well. So I'm going to give you roughly 5 years from conception to first exhibition. My takeaways are vast, and that's of course a very challenging one. And I would put it to you this way, my takeaway is, and I'm speaking very personally, right? Not necessarily speaking for Stanley or Stacy or Carol or Cindy, any of the other people involved, but the frustration that here's a 165-year history and counting, and currently 105 institutions, and we had 90 minutes to tell the story. And as a result, that means that there's so many stories that are not in this film, or even stories that are in this film that are not as complex as they might otherwise have been if you knew that you had time. And it's not to sound like sour grapes, but if we consider that Ken Burns had 10 hours to tell a 5-year part of the American history, which was the Civil War, here a history that is as significant, if not more so, we had 90 minutes. So that's kind of a particular takeaway, but I think that the one other that I think you see present in the film, and that is how often black college students, well, it was what Ian said, and I don't know if Ian's here. Ian kind of noted that, and he's the programming director, he had noted how the aspiration for education for African Americans from the very beginning, and really take it all the way up to Southern in 72, has always been met with kind of violence and resistance. And you want to say, we got a right to be educated too. And so first the resistance to our aspiration for education and our determination to be educated at whatever the cost. And so that's the strong takeaway that I had.
The key to any next-gen recoil rig is balance while keeping your rig short and light. Your eye, shoulder, and hand placement never change, so the key is to slide the camera as far back as needed to achieve the perfect balance. This forces your EVF and camera control forward, but our unique VCT base plate design gives you extra rod space, making it possible to mount accessories close to the camera body, allowing for a perfectly balanced recoil rig. The next-gen recoil's adjustability is great enough to balance any size camera with any size lens and any additional accessories, and its quick releasability makes setup and breakdown fast and effortless.
I think that motion picture is probably one of the most powerful ways you can communicate a message. I think 10 years ago, if you didn't have massive budgets, you were severely limited on the quality of story that you could tell based off of the music that you had access to. That to me is what Musicbed changed, is it made the best artists in the world available to hundreds of thousands of filmmakers. And that hasn't really existed before. What we've done is created a platform to allow the creatives to be making the choice of who wins. I mean, that's been one of the most fulfilling things for us, is watching hundreds of artists just almost begin to dream at another level.
Yes, sir.
I want to commend you on your archival work. That was excellent, all of the research that was obviously done to put this film together. And I commend you also for bringing to light the Morris Brown situation. I'm familiar with Wheeling College here in Louisiana, another defunct institution. Did your research bring you to any other institutions that may have closed their doors because of some other political or economic situations?
Certainly. I mean, so Morris Brown became kind of the poster child, but it's certainly not the only one. Cheney is underfunded, and Cheney or Lincoln, depending, could be deemed to be the first. And so that was something that we had wanted to look at, that here was one of the very first, or the first HBCU, and it's barely surviving, and the state of Pennsylvania wants to defund it. And so that was a contemplation for a sort of bringing us to the end of the film. There's another one that we had looked at. It doesn't come to my mind, but Morris Brown is kind of the stand-in for that, and I think that those in the know recognize that HBCUs are very, very challenged. And this is just to kind of highlight how complicated it is that how do you want to end such a film, right? And we certainly want to be truthful and accurate and acknowledge the challenges, but we certainly didn't want to end the film with this sort of notion that these are failing institutions. What's the one in it's a very small one in Texas that I looked at a lot, and one of the ways that they are surviving is, no, it's not Wiley. They got, it's right outside of Dallas. They got rid of the football team. They plant vegetables on the football field, the former football field. They got a lot more Latino students, and so it's a complicated, and that's to my earlier wish that there's so much more that we could have told. One or two more questions. So the two of you you'll get the last question, ma'am, but somebody down here, that looks like four. So if I'll speak fast if you ask quickly. Yes. One of the two of you, I don't know who had her hand up first.
Today, being a current graduate, a lot of Black students feel like going to a white school and getting a degree at that school weighs more than going to an HBCU. So in this film, it'll be great to even witness and see that a lot of white students come to our school and get their education from law to engineering to nursing, to show the difference that our school does matter, and the weight is, there's no difference.
And that's to the idea, so it's, again, there's so many ideas that and I agree with you that these are vital institutions, and some of the ways that, like many institution, to remain viable, international students are part of it, non-African American students are part of it. So you're absolutely right. I'm only so sorry that that's not part of this fabric. So let me say this, let me get out this important announcement. I think it's hashtag HBCU Rising. So please check that out. We're doing a digital yearbook. So if you have stories about your HBCU experience, your grandmother, your grandfather, your greats, whatever, please contact Monica at firelightmedia.org. The film will be broadcast in February 2018 on PBS. We're doing a rollout now of festivals, community screenings. It'll be screened for every president of each of the HBCUs. It'll be screened for all the leadership of the Divine Nine. We're doing everything to get it out there. We're relying on word of mouth to kind of make it clear. And in some ways, we're going to utilize the digital framework to tell these kinds of stories. Yes, ma'am. Okay, so I've answered yours. No. Okay. Yeah, we'll get there.
This really felt like it could have been 5 or 6 whole separate movies.
Absolutely.
And I like that you didn't try to homogenize it into one feel, that it had different paces to it. And I really hope that by editing it the way that you did, that you get a chance to have more from this. Because even with the footage you have, you could have 5 or 6 whole movies.
Hey, look, Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois is much more complicated than what's presented. So let me just say this. So as a way to close, this is the first documentary about HBCUs. It is certainly our hope that this will inspire filmmakers to find the stories that they wish to tell. Could be about Xavier, which I think, very important. One of my favorite narratives is, and I said this to Ian, that, or I said this in my interview, Spelman College graduates more PhD candidates than any other college in the country. I repeat that, Spelman College. And if you break that down, who goes to Spelman? Black women. More black women PhD candidates than any place else in the nation. That's a movie. There's something there. And so that's certainly the hope, that this not only inspires other filmmakers, but it makes funders aware that there are these stories to tell and how important they are. Please tell your friends to come tomorrow afternoon at 2:15. And thank you very much for coming. Thank you.
So much for bringing film to us. I really appreciate it.